There comes a point in every man's life where he discovers just how much weight his patience can carry. Most men don't begin a relationship angry or guarded. They begin hopeful, gentle, and open-hearted. A patient man especially enters love with the belief that tolerance is a virtue, that forgiveness is strength, and that giving someone the benefit of the doubt is the highest form of loyalty. He doesn't see patience as passivity. He sees it as commitment. When she is upset, he listens. When she's unreasonable, he explains. When she falters, he forgives. He tells himself this is what love is supposed to be: two people giving each other grace, bending so the relationship doesn't break. But the quiet truth is that patience, when stretched too far, begins to look like silence. And silence is often misunderstood. She doesn't always notice that his restraint is a choice, that his calm is intentional. Instead, she starts to interpret it as weakness. She mistakes his willingness to forgive as proof that boundaries don't exist. She tests, not always maliciously, but because human nature pushes against limits. And when limits aren't enforced, disrespect trickles in, slowly, almost invisibly. At first, it looks small. A sarcastic remark that he laughs off. A dismissive tone that he overlooks. A forgotten apology that he lets slide. He tells himself not to make a big deal of it, that love requires compromise, that if he holds steady, she will eventually meet him in the middle. But compromise without boundaries is not compromise, it is erosion. Every time he swallows his truth to keep the peace, a piece of him dissolves. What began as patience becomes self-betrayal. And though he doesn't see it yet, the cracks are forming, preparing the ground for the moment when even his gentleness will not be enough to hold the weight. The unraveling of a patient man doesn't happen with one dramatic event. It's not a single explosion or betrayal that breaks him. It's the slow, steady accumulation of small wounds that never heal. Women rarely notice when they are cutting into his spirit one slice at a time, because the patient man hides his pain well. He tells himself that enduring is noble, that if he just absorbs her moods and lets her chaos pass through him, the storm will clear. But storms that go unchecked only grow stronger, and his silence becomes the ground where her behavior takes root. Every little dismissal matters. The sarcastic comments in front of friends that make him the butt of the joke. The passive-aggressive tone that poisons conversations. The way affection becomes a bargaining tool, withheld whenever she wants to control the outcome. He absorbs it all, believing that if he doesn't react, he's proving his love. What he doesn't see is that by tolerating it, he is training her subconscious. He is teaching her that disrespect has no consequence, that his boundaries are elastic, that she can bend him but never break him. And the more she sees him bend, the less she respects him. This is how admiration dies, slowly, almost imperceptibly. She doesn't stop caring all at once. She simply begins to look at him differently. Instead of a strong, steady man, she sees someone who will tolerate anything. And in her subconscious mind, that tolerance doesn't feel safe, it feels soft. She may not admit it, but women don't respect what doesn't push back. So she keeps testing, pushing further, adding more weight until one day he is crushed beneath the 1,000 tiny acts that, on their own, seemed harmless, but together turned his patience into chains. The patient man doesn't lose his warmth overnight. There's no single moment of betrayal that transforms him, it's a quiet, creeping shift that even he may not notice at first. He still shows up, still speaks, still gives, but each gesture carries a fraction less of the passion it once held. The love that flowed freely becomes measured, careful, restrained. His laughter fades not because he has become bitter, but because he has learned that joy, when offered freely, can be ignored or weaponized. His touch loses some of its warmth, not out of malice, but out of exhaustion. Over time, his energy begins to retract, like the tide pulling away from the shore, leaving him standing alone, emotionally exposed to a sea of indifference that he once thought would embrace him. She may notice the change in him and label it coldness, but that is a misunderstanding. He hasn't changed at his core. What has changed is his environment, and his adaptation to it. His patience, once a river of calm, has been met with stones thrown from every direction. Every ignored sacrifice, every dismissed act of care, every moment when his effort was taken for granted, has chipped away at the reservoir of his emotional availability. Where he once sought connection, he now seeks survival. Where he once bent to hold the relationship together, he now holds himself together. His generosity is no longer automatic, it has boundaries, invisible to anyone who only saw the man he once was. This shift is not about anger, though anger may eventually rise if pushed far enough. It is about self-preservation. His bluntness, his guardedness, his refusal to give endlessly without reciprocity, these are not faults, they are defenses. They are the armor he builds after years of offering his heart to someone who only accepted it when convenient. And in that armor, he discovers a clarity he never had before. He will no longer surrender his core for someone who values his endurance over his essence. The warmth is gone, not because he is cruel, but because he has learned the cost of unprotected tenderness. The emotional toll on a patient man accumulates quietly, almost invisibly, until it becomes a weight too heavy to carry. He doesn't recognize it at first, because his focus is always on her, on keeping the peace, on preserving the illusion of love that he hopes will flourish if he endures enough. Every slight, every careless word, every subtle act of manipulation chips away at him. He forgives, swallows his pride, and tells himself that love requires compromise, that relationships are never perfect, that patience is a strength. But what he doesn't see is that he is compromising himself, giving pieces of his core that can never be returned. Each act of tolerance, when unappreciated, becomes another scar etched onto his spirit. He begins to lie awake at night, replaying moments over and over, wondering what he did wrong, why his efforts never seem to matter, why his sacrifices are met with criticism rather than gratitude. He questions himself constantly, his sensitivity, his strength, his worth, because he has been trained to measure his value by the approval of someone who never truly respected him. And slowly, he realizes that no amount of patience will satisfy someone who is addicted to emotional chaos. The love he once offered freely is treated like a commodity, taken for granted, tested, and stretched to its limits. He gives more, and she expects more, yet she never recognizes the cost. This is where disillusionment begins to take root. The man who once believed that calmness and consistency were virtues starts to see them as vulnerabilities. He understands that peace and stability do not create attraction in someone who craves drama. Every effort to maintain harmony feels like running on a treadmill that never moves. And in the quiet moments, he feels it, the slow erosion of his trust, his energy, and his spirit. The emotional toll is not about one instance of betrayal, it is the cumulative weight of 1,000 small indignities. Each one alone seems minor, but together, they form a burden that bends even the strongest man. And as he bends, he learns the harsh truth: patience without respect is not love, it is endurance of abuse. The retreat of a patient man is rarely dramatic, but it is profound. He doesn't explode, he doesn't yell, he doesn't throw accusations. Instead, he begins to pull back, quietly, almost imperceptibly. The man who once gave his time, his energy, and his love without hesitation starts to ration them, not because he stopped caring, but because he has learned that giving endlessly only leaves him drained. His presence becomes measured. His conversations become shorter. His touch becomes cautious. He is still there physically, but emotionally, he is withdrawing, creating a space between himself and the chaos that once defined the relationship. This withdrawal is not born of malice or cruelty, it is born of necessity. He understands now that his vulnerability was used against him, that his generosity was expected rather than appreciated, and that his patience was mistaken for weakness. Each slight, each manipulation, each unrecognized effort has built a wall around him, one that protects his spirit from further erosion. And while she may notice the change and accuse him of becoming distant or cold, she fails to see the years of emotional labor that led to this point. She remembers the moment he stopped giving freely, but not the countless moments when he bent himself into knots trying to maintain the connection. In retreating, he reclaims what has always been his dignity, his peace, his sense of self. He no longer measures his value by her recognition, nor does he allow her chaos to dictate his emotional state. The man who once prioritized her moods now prioritizes his own stability. He is still capable of love, but it is no longer indiscriminate. It is reserved for those who respect it, for those who recognize that patience is a gift, not a guarantee. In this quiet withdrawal, he is not giving up. He is finally protecting himself. And in doing so, he discovers a freedom he has long been denied, the freedom to exist without constant emotional assault, the freedom to honor his own boundaries, and the freedom to be a man who will no longer allow his heart to be a playground for someone else's drama. The revelation of a patient man comes slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one day he sees the truth with perfect clarity. For years, he tried to make love work by giving endlessly, by softening himself to accommodate her moods, by swallowing his own needs to keep the relationship alive. He believed that patience and understanding were enough, that love could be nurtured through endurance alone. But over time, he begins to notice a pattern, a quiet but undeniable reality: his efforts were never enough, and they never would be. No matter how much he gave, no matter how much he bent or compromised, it was always met with indifference, testing, or subtle manipulation. And in that moment of clarity, he understands that the problem was never his love, it was the environment in which he offered it. This revelation is not accompanied by drama or fireworks. It is quiet, almost surgical, stripping away the illusions he once clung to. He no longer hopes that a kind word or a gentle gesture will soften her, because he sees that she does not value peace, that she thrives on chaos, and that his calm has been misinterpreted as weakness. Every unacknowledged sacrifice, every dismissed expression of care, every act of patience that went unnoticed builds the foundation for this awakening. He sees that his love, once given freely, has been treated as a tool for her emotional comfort rather than a gift to be cherished. With this understanding comes a shift in how he interacts with the world. He does not become bitter, he becomes protective of himself. He stops investing in someone who cannot see his worth. He withdraws not out of revenge but out of self-preservation. The man who once bent over backward to maintain a relationship now stands upright, grounded in the knowledge of his own value. And in that upright stance, he becomes unmovable. His patience no longer leaves him exposed. His silence is no longer misunderstood. He has learned the ultimate lesson: love without respect is not love at all, and the most powerful thing a man can do is to preserve his peace before anyone else can take it from him. A patient man turning cold is not a sudden transformation, it is a profound revelation, the result of countless moments where his love was taken for granted, his patience misread, and his efforts ignored. He doesn't stop loving easily. He stops when love becomes self-destruction, when giving becomes exhaustion, and when being present no longer earns him respect or reciprocity. Over time, he learns that kindness alone cannot sustain a relationship where manipulation, chaos, and emotional testing are constant. Every act of forgiveness, every swallowed grievance, every sacrifice has been catalogued by the universe in its quiet way, and eventually, the tally is complete. He reaches the point where he understands that continuing to give would not protect the relationship, it would only continue to deplete him. At this stage, he does not raise his voice or lash out. He does not dramatize or plead for understanding. Instead, he exercises the quietest, most powerful form of resistance: withdrawal. He becomes unavailable emotionally, not because he is cruel, but because he is finally protecting himself. His silence is deliberate, his absence speaks volumes. He stops explaining, stops justifying, stops bending to meet impossible expectations. The man who once gave everything now gives only to those who respect it, and in that discernment, he discovers a strength that cannot be shaken. Those who once took his patience for granted are confronted with a reality they cannot control. His calm, once ignored, is now a statement. His presence, once expected, is now earned. This is the final lesson of the patient man: his peace is priceless, and he will no longer allow anyone to erode it. Love is not measured by how much suffering one can endure, nor by how silently one can absorb chaos. True love requires respect, reciprocity, and appreciation. When these are absent, leaving is not betrayal, it is self-preservation. The strongest act a man can take is to protect his own heart. In walking away, he reclaims not only his dignity but also the version of himself that was once willing to give fully, unconditionally, and without compromise. And in that reclamation, he becomes untouchable, not through anger, but through clarity, self-respect, and the unwavering commitment to honor his own soul above all else.